Welcome to a special edition of PFTPM, one that isn't occasioned by any breaking news or any new developments. It's simply a result of the fact that I missed PFT Live for medical reasons. Doesn't that sound ominous? Well, it felt pretty ominous at the time. Now, I've been very open about the fact that I've had Crohn's disease for some 14 years now. I probably had it for a period of time, maybe up to a decade before, and didn't realize it. It wasn't until I had a positive hemoccult test and a colonoscopy that, boom, that's what I had. It gets me once or twice a year, usually in the middle of the night. Usually I wake up with a horrible stomach ache and nature takes its course from there, or doesn't for a couple of hours, which was part of the problem, which included profuse sweating, intense pain. And I've been through it enough. Anybody that's been through intense physical pain, I think you get to a point where you trick yourself into thinking it's going to end at some point, and you cling to that. This is going to be over at some point, and it does kind of help you get through it. And then when it's over, you kind of forget how bad it hurt. I don't completely forget how bad it hurt. And at the end of the day, it would have been imprudent of me to proceed with PFT Live, because I would have made, at some point during the program, a mad dash across the studio, through the storage area in the space above our garage, down the steps, down the second part of the steps, across the garage, into the house, hoping to beat the clock. So nobody wants that, especially not the person who would be the one causing that mess. But everything's fine now for the most part. And I wasn't going to do anything supplemental to the various game previews that we prepared yesterday as part of the Joint Mega Picks podcast with Chris Sims, Unbuttoned, and PFTPM. But last night's game was too significant to ignore. So I've actually, it's funny. I'm far more prepared for these than I am for PFT Live, which says something about my preparation level for PFT Live. Okay, so the Lions beat the Cowboys 44-30. Chris and I had both picked the Cowboys to win. We saw a different Lions team last night than we'd seen in recent weeks, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. I know they scored enough points to beat the Giants in overtime, but that still felt like kind of a flat performance. And the first game in which Dan Campbell took over play calling at a time when no one knew it officially, we just gleaned it from the fact that every time a play was in the process of being called, he was looking through his cheaters and he was talking into his microphone, which created the impression that he's calling the plays. Last night, it seemed to work better than it has. And one of the reasons it works, you got to give the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs. Look at what happens when you give the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs, both in the running game and in the passing game. He finished, if I can read my handwriting here, and sometimes I can't, with 12 carries for 43 yards, but 3 touchdowns on the ground. And he had 7 catches for 77 yards. And he's just got a nose for the end zone. When he starts moving, the defenders, more often than not, can't get to him. You gotta get him quick. If you don't get him quick, he kicks it into high gear, and off he goes. There was that key third down in the first half where he slammed on the brakes. Deron Bland went flying, and Jahmyr Gibbs picked up the extra yardage necessary to get the first down. So it was working better last night. It wasn't perfect. Whatever that play was, where they were trying to throw it to Dan Skipper, take that one out of the playbook. Let's not get too fancy. That's usually the kind of play we see from an offensive coordinator who's trying to become a head coach. Like, hey, look what I can do. Look, Ma, no hands. Look, Ma, no brains. We see that from time to time. It was just a weird glitch. And they managed to keep the Cowboys pass rush, for the most part, from getting to Jared Goff. Early on, there was a sack right up the middle, the kind of thing that the Vikings put out there for the rest of the NFL to try to duplicate, pressure up the middle on Jared Goff, get him off the spot, make him uncomfortable. It clicked last night for the Lions. And every time the Cowboys started to get back into it, the Lions were able to get down the field and get more points and stretch out the lead and take it to the point where it was impossible for the Cowboys to come back. When it was 30-27, could have gone either way. But that's when the Lions, I think, realized playoffs are on the line here. And it was expected for the Lions to not just be a playoff team, but to be a Super Bowl contender. So one of these two teams had to lose. That's what's so compelling about many of the games that are coming up this weekend. It's the same kind of stakes, whether it's Steelers-Ravens, whether it's Bengals-Bills, Colts-Jaguars, Bears-Packers, Texans-Chiefs, even Chargers-Eagles, although there's a little less steam for the Eagles now that the Cowboys have lost. We'll talk about playoff pictures for those teams coming up. The bottom line is the offense was working, and Dan Campbell did a much better job than we had seen of calling the plays. And this isn't the crappy Cowboys defense that we saw earlier in the year. They had played better in recent weeks. The Lions just got back to being the Lions we're used to seeing. It also helped that Amon-Ra St. Brown played. Dan Campbell created the impression after the loss to the Packers on Thanksgiving that St. Brown was going to miss a game or two with the ankle injury he suffered early against the Green Bay Packers. There he was. And at first I thought, if you saw the video of him walking in, it looked like he was being a little careful without trying to create the impression that he was being careful. Just take it slowly, move deliberately. But when it was time to play, he got it done. And he got enough catches, and it was inevitable he was going to do it this year unless he missed the rest of the season due to injury. He has the most catches of any player in the player's first 5 seasons. He passed Michael Thomas last night, the former Saints receiver who was doing all-time stuff in that offense in the latter years of Sean Payton and Drew Brees in New Orleans. 5'10" was the record. 5'11" is the new record, and Amon-Ra St. Brown has 4 games left to add to it. So having him there helped the offense too. There were some big moments late in the game when you think they're going to run. They softened up a little bit. The Cowboys defense did, and Amon-Ra St. Brown made a big catch, got the ball down into what ultimately was third touchdown range for Jahmyr Gibbs. I neglected to mention Jahmyr Gibbs has now caught Barry Sanders for the most total touchdowns before turning 24. That's a very specific stat that is unrelated to how many games someone's played or how many seasons they've played. Regardless, before the age of 24, Jahmyr Gibbs has 47 total touchdowns. And if they use him like they did last night, he will have a lot more. That's not to say they should ignore David Montgomery. He has a role. But if Gibbs was in an offense where he was the guy, he'd be an MVP candidate. And credit to him for not saying anything, doing anything to suggest frustration with the fact that he could be regarded as one of the best players in the game with the most impressive stats and the awards that go along with it. It'll be interesting to see what happens when the season ends and he's eligible for a second contract. And will the Lions pay him not based on what he's actually done, but what this player is capable of doing? You have a Ferrari. It's up to you to decide how much you're going to drive it. But you've got a Ferrari in Jahmyr Gibbs. You got to pay accordingly for that Ferrari. Okay. A couple of the other receivers in the game that I want to address. And look, both teams have highly talented receivers who from time to time do things that make you scratch your head. And it's George Pickens for the Cowboys and Jameson Williams for the Lions. I'll start with Williams. He was not a gigantic part of the game plan, but he got targeted more than any other line with 7 catches for 96 yards. He almost had a touchdown on a running play, but he had stepped out of bounds. Replay review made that clear that he stepped out of bounds. He thought he made it in. He is one of the most talented receivers in football. He and George Pickens are right up there. The question is getting the most out of them. Now, for the Lions, it's finding a way to use him more. You got one football. You got Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta when he's healthy. There's one ball. And Williams has already gotten a second contract, but he'd surely love to get the ball more. He'd like to show off what he can do. Every receiver wants to have the ball, especially if the team isn't winning as much as it could be or should be. That's when the very simple logic kicks in. I'm not getting the ball as much as I should, and we're not winning. If I got the ball more, we'd be winning. When you're winning, when you're 15-2, and Jameson Williams isn't getting the ball as much as maybe he should, doesn't matter. It's easier to keep that from being an issue. And I think that's one of Dan Campbell's superpowers. He's able to keep everybody on the same page. We've never heard anything about any of the offensive star players being upset about how frequently they get the ball or not. I also think Amon-Ra St. Brown is a big part of that. The leadership he provides as a player, we were talking about this last night when we were watching the game. I think that oftentimes the leadership from the players goes a lot farther than the mandates from the coaches. I think certain players, most players, are more inclined to listen to and respond to other players, whether it's quarterback, whether it's a receiver, whether it's Frank Ragnow. The Lions' offensive lines looked sloppy at times this year. Maybe Ragnow had a level of leadership and accountability that he imposed on the rest of the line, and it made a difference regardless. Jameson Williams is a special talent, and on other teams, it would be the Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams show, and that team would be highly successful if you use those guys to the fullest of their abilities. Now, we had seen in recent weeks the Cowboys using George Pickens to the fullest of his abilities. He had, between the Raiders game and the Eagles game, it was 144 receiving yards on 9 catches and a touchdown one week, and 146 on 9 catches and a touchdown the next week. He had a solid day, not spectacular, against the Kansas City Chiefs in the win that was the Cowboys' 3rd in a row. Something seemed off with Pickens last night. I love studying football player demeanor. Usually it's the quarterback that you can glean the most from about how the day's going and what kind of a vibe he's sending out to the rest of the team. But last night, Pickens seemed a little disengaged, a little disinterested. There was one play where he kind of lollygagged on his route. The ball came to him. He didn't make the catch. You could see that Dak Prescott had something to say after that. It just felt like he was a little off last night. And the opportunity was there when CeeDee Lamb suffered a concussion. It was clearly a concussion. We look for the fencing posture when a guy hits the ground. And when CeeDee Lamb came down hard on the artificial turf at Ford Field, hit his head, we saw the arms go up. It's the involuntary reflex when there's been a head injury. They quickly ruled Lamb out. But that was the opportunity for Pickens, and he just didn't deliver. Ryan Florio did, but George Pickens didn't. And I don't know that it would have made a difference, but he just seemed off last night. And as you're getting closer and closer to your next contract, whether you get it from the Cowboys or someone else, it's more important to finish strong. Got 4 regular season games left and maybe no postseason games. No opportunities in January when most of the league is sitting home watching you and marveling at what you can do and making their budget and coming up with their targets and getting ready to tamper both legally and illegally on who they're looking for. I can't imagine the Cowboys letting him go. But every bad game, every off game, he was targeted 9 times, 5 catches for, I think that says 37 yards. I can't read my handwriting. But regardless, it wasn't the kind of game we had seen in recent weeks from George Pickens, and there was a prime opportunity. And okay, the Lions bracket him, have an extra guy over the top. But he's special enough to beat that from time to time. And it's incumbent on the offensive coordinator to have plays ready to go, scheme things up to get the ball in the hands of a player like George Pickens. Look at what the Lions did in the first half. It's very simple to run a jet sweep and get the ball in the hands, get involved the player who knows he can make a difference. And I think there needs to be a concerted effort beyond the passing game to get the ball in George Pickens' hands. Not just that slant, because who knows what happens with that slant, including a face mask that he committed while trying to get open. But, just quick screen, jet sweep, different ways. Swing him through the backfield, throw the ball to him behind the line of scrimmage, and let him go. He's got the skills. And we saw it. We saw him hurdle the guy late in the game against the Chiefs. He's got the skills to make things happen when he has the ball. So watch those guys for the rest of the season. Jameson Williams and George Pickens. They're both special talents. And, I go all the way back to Randy Moss. When Randy Moss was on the Vikings, it was a given. They were going to get him the ball. And anytime they spotted single coverage, we're throwing him the ball. Anytime the defensive back was giving him a 10-yard cushion, we're throwing him the ball. It was all quarterback, what's the coverage on Moss? Okay, we're getting him the ball. We're getting him the ball. And that attitude, I think, needs to be there, especially with the George Pickens, if and when CeeDee Lamb isn't playing. And we'll see whether he gets cleared for next week's game when the Vikings come to town and the Cowboys try to turn this thing around. So where are we? And I know that the Next Gen Stats put out the numbers that apply a percentage to a team's chance to make it to the playoffs. And I assume we'll have Steve Kornacki on Football Night in America at some point. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. The percentages are the percentages. I mean, how many games do we watch where somebody's got a 2% chance of winning and they end up winning the game? It's part of the fabric of watching the NFL now. You hear these percentages all the time, and Amazon AI. And there was that thing last night. Well, Amazon AI says that the Cowboys need to score by 3:17 on the clock. You know, I'm not a big fan of taking an inherently subjective sport where you got 22 guys on the field trying to impose their will on each other and turning it into a numbers game. I just don't like that. I like football for what it is. 11 on 11, let's go. And all the history of years gone by, games gone by, thousands of iterations, it creates trends. But forget about the trends. We're watching a game play out right now. Nothing that's ever happened in the past matters. We're watching a game play out in this moment. So I say that because the Cowboys are less than 10% likely to make the playoffs at this point. It's a very simple proposition. They got 4 games left. The Vikings, the Chargers, at the Commanders, I think. Yes, at the Commanders and at the Giants. They got to run the table. And the key is going to be the Chargers in week 16. They should beat the Vikings, but who knows? You can't have a letdown after last night's loss. You can't think it's over. Dak Prescott said, we're not deflated. They have to keep going. But if they could win the last 4, they would be 10-6-1. So what they need to have happen, it's very simple. The Eagles need to lose 2 out of the next 3. No, 3 out of the next 5. 3 out of the next 5. 2 out of the 3 would be part of it. They have to lose 3 out of the next 5. They have to go 2-3 is what I meant to say. And they've got the Chargers on the road Monday night, the Raiders at the Commanders, at the Bills, and the Commanders. They should go 3-2 at a minimum. They should beat the Raiders, the Commanders, and the Commanders. They should. Now, the Commanders didn't blink when it was time to play the Broncos. And, hey, try to put a positive bow on a negative season. Try to avoid talk that Dan Quinn will be on the hot seat next year. And if they don't win another game or win at least 2 of the final 5, Dan Quinn's going to be one of the guys that everyone puts on the hot seat going in to 2026. And I understand that Josh Harris, the new owner of the Commanders, doesn't want to be like Daniel Snyder. But if they just finish the year in free fall, how do you not monitor at a minimum whether it happens again next year in Washington? So I don't think it's a gimme against the Commanders. And look, right now, what we've seen from the Eagles offensively, I don't want to take anything away from the Bears. What we saw last Friday, is that the Bears stepping up, or is it the Eagles just in a late season rut like we saw in 2023 when they lost 5 of the last 6? They were 10-1. They lost 5 of the last 6. They beat the Giants late in the season, and then they lost to the Buccaneers 32-9 in the wild card round. So it's not over for the Cowboys. If the Cowboys go 4-0, and if the Eagles go 2-3, the Eagles will be 10-7. The Cowboys will be 10-6-1, and that tie game from week 4 against the Green Bay Packers will be the thing that propels the Cowboys to the NFC East crown. That's their path now. Wild card, probably not going to happen. Division championship, that's their path. And this is where the numbers need to sit down and shut up. It's not crazy to see the Cowboys win the next 4, and it's not crazy to see the Eagles lose 3 of the next 5. That's not crazy. That doesn't feel like a less than 10% chance. So we'll see how that plays out. The Lions, by the way, they're now 8-5. They finish with the Rams on the road, the Steelers at the Vikings on Christmas Day, and the Bears. And who knows? There's so many different connected parts. Can they win the division? That depends upon the Bears and the Packers. But I keep coming back to the fact that you've got in the NFC, 2nd and 3rd place team in the North, 2nd and 3rd place team in the West, and the 2nd place team in the South. 5 teams jostling for 3 spots. 2 are going to get left out. And those 2 in this wide open year, they could be good enough to win the whole thing if they would get in. So the Lions still need to keep winning. They need to keep playing like they did last night. They got to take this on the road to the Rams. Matthew Stafford gets a crack at the Lions again. That's a big game next week. And with the Steelers, who knows where they're going to be by the time that game rolls around. But the Lions are in much better shape by winning than if they had fallen to 7-6. And I actually think that's it. Oh, wait, no, I got more. I got one more topic that I wedged into the bottom of this card. I don't tell anyone. These are the cards I use on Sunday night. And I take some with me, but don't tell anyone. I steal some because they come in handy. I guess it's still NBC business. It's not like I'm using it for, a chili recipe. Not that chili is anything I'll be eating tonight after my misadventures of the early morning hours, but I do use it for work purposes. So you can tell NBC that I steal these. Anyway, I tucked this down in the corner. There were some officiating moments last night that they bear mention. Because the NFL knows it's got to improve the officiating function. It knows. It's one of those things that I think they just don't want to talk about, and there's no one within the NFL power structure that is willing to burn the political capital necessary to be the one who stands up and says, we got to do something. Because when you're pushing against the momentum to keep things as they are, you better be confident in your position and you better be committed to the cause, because it is not going to be easy. And the other side of it too is, so one of the conversations I had with someone from one of the teams about full-time officials, somebody at the league office has to be willing to take on the project. Oh, you got an idea? You got an idea for something? All right, you're in charge of the committee. You got to find time to do that on top of everything else you're already doing. Okay, great idea. Get to work on it. But they know, and I saw, and I'm going to write about this at PFT, there was an announcement of some partnership with the Big 12 Conference where they're going to have resources available to officials at the Big 12. Like, let's try to make these guys better on the way in. And it doesn't cost us to do it. That's the other part of it too. We're going to engage in education and training of people who could eventually be NFL officials, and the Big 12 will pay them to do it. Genius. But that's the reflection that they know that something needs to happen. They wouldn't do it. It's unprecedented, the tweet from NFL media. Oh, it's unprecedented. Yeah, it's unprecedented because they know that the current status of the officiating is unprecedented. It's unprecedentedly bad. Anyway, last night, the safety that wasn't, it's good that someone fed the angle to Amazon, and I assume it came from the league's network of cameras, the Hawkeye system, because it didn't look clear and obvious that all of the ball was out of the end zone when Dak Prescott was hit near the goal line. And remember, for a touchdown, all you have to do is put any part of the ball over the front of the line. That means to avoid a safety, every bit of the ball has to get beyond the line, the outside edge, not the inside edge. The white stripe isn't good enough. The whole ball has to be out of the end zone, starting with the beginning of the white stripe. And that angle that they shared with Amazon showed, yes, the ball was out, clear and obvious. So the system worked. Technology in that setting worked, but boy, it was close. And I harp on the clear and obvious standard because at times I feel like the NFL's implicit acknowledgement that they need to get these calls right sometimes in the replay process results in the judgment of the person making the decision overriding the judgment of the officials who made the decision in real time because they want to get it right. They abandon the clear and obvious standard. Yeah, it was a mistake, but, all right, it wasn't a clear mistake, but we think that it was the wrong call. But it wasn't clear and obvious, but we're just going to change it. And I had a coach call this week, and this is one of the issues with replay review, and it gets back to the transparency when it comes to officiating. And this is a simple question. The coach said to me, who's in charge of the officials? And I stopped and thought about it. And he said, if you have to stop and think about it, that's a problem. Like, it's not Walt Anderson. He's the mouthpiece. Troy Vincent's in charge of football operations. It's probably Ramon George, Mark Butterworth is ostensibly in charge of replay. The teams still don't know who's in the room making the decisions when it's time to make these decisions. That's not good for anyone. And you look at what some of the college conferences have done. The ACC is at the leading edge of it. The spring football leagues have done it. Let's see and hear the sausage-making process. Do they fear that it'll make it worse for us to hear nonsensical ramblings during these communications? You take away that element of mystery, you're going to go a long way toward getting people to not think the fix is in. This goes back to what the commissioner said in 2012 when he hated gambling and the league hated gambling. Normal incidents of the game in a world of widespread legalized betting will spark allegations of game fixing, point shaving, etc. You got to have transparency. So the tinfoil hat crowd will say, oh, okay, I understand why they did that. That's what the video we saw last night of the safety told us. Okay, I understand why they did that. Before that, something's going on here. We see that video. Okay, now I get it. So if we were privy to these conversations, then there'd be a lot less people emailing me saying the fix is in. And I think the NFL's approach is just earmuffs, bury their head, ignore it until Congress shows up or until somebody gets indicted or until there's an agency created by the federal government that has jurisdiction over professional sports. Until that happens, that works. But they got to clean up their own backyard. I said this when it comes to head injuries. October 2009, they brought the commissioner and DeMaurice Smith, who was in charge of the union at the time, to Congress. And the message was simple. Clean up your mess or we'll clean it up for you. And you won't like how we clean it up. Haven't we been there? Hasn't mom said, you better clean up your room. And if you don't, I will. And it's like, uh-oh, if mom cleans up the room, then this is going to get put here and that's going to put, and I'm going to lose this. And I'll just do it. I'll just do it myself. You always want to clean up your own mess in lieu of having someone else clean it up. The odd offensive pass interference call on Jake Ferguson, and it ultimately meant nothing because the pass was incomplete and it would have been fourth down. The penalty was declined. But it looked like it was going to be defensive pass interference. That was an odd moment. And pass interference is always going to be subjective. It's not something that works for replay review. We found that out in 2019. That was the reaction to the horrible miss in the NFC Championship between the Rams and the Saints. They made replay review applicable to pass interference calls and non-calls, and it was a mess. And I almost wonder whether they deliberately made it a mess so they could go back to the old way. Like, all right, you want this? You got it. We'll show you what it's like. And they just screwed it up. That was back in the days of Al Riveron. They screwed it up. And I remember when they did the preseason seminars, and it was the result of a seminar that they had with the NFL media people. And all that stuff's supposed to be off the record, but it wasn't said in the NBC session that I can disclose, but it was said in the NFL media session that there was some fairly obscure play from a Chargers Chiefs Thursday night game where Mike Williams, like, oh, well, under this, hey, with replay review, he's going to get called for offensive pass interference. I was like, what? So I don't know. I think they could make it subject to replay review if you have people with good common sense. And this gets back to the sky judge concept, the true sky judge. Retired referees who no longer can get around on the field the way that maybe they once did, and that'll happen to all of us, in a booth at the game, wearing the uniform, member of the crew, authorized to communicate with the referee or maybe other members of the crew, to have the same kind of consultation. Like if we're going to have this consultation where they're standing around trying to recreate in their mind's eye what they saw, wouldn't it be nice to have someone involved who can see it? Like if the line judge is saying, well, you know, I saw a grab of the arm that impaired the receiver. The replay official says there's an arm grab, but it's not an impediment. That was the Texans Colts play. The controversial pass interference that happened on the play where the clock apparently ran out. There was a grab at the top of the route, but the grab didn't do anything. The receiver broke inside and fell down. The grab did not impede the receiver. So you could have somebody who sees all this stuff. If they're going to be allowed to stand around and say, what did you see? I don't know. What did you see? I don't know. What did you see? Let's have somebody who saw it. That's the solution. That's better than replay assist, because replay assist is this amorphous thing that we don't know who's making the decisions. Is it the league office? Is it the replay assistant? You need a member of the crew to be in the booth who is authorized and who can be trusted to provide accurate information to the individuals on the field. And that person gets graded accordingly. I know there's a concern. What if they go rogue? Well, if they go rogue, you kick them out of the job. If they're giving bad information, if they're not processing with their eyes what we all see at home and relaying accurate, competent information to the officials on the field, then you get somebody else. But that's the way to do it if they really care about it. It requires creativity. It requires a step back to square one. How would we come up with an officiating function today? If we had just invented football today, how would we officiate the game? Not, well, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we've always done it is poison to any organization that strives for excellence. Hey, what about this? Nah, this is the way we've always done it. But this could be better. Yeah, this is the way we've always done it. There's a lot of that going on in the NFL. And it's not just because they don't want to spend the money. That's part of it. I think they don't want to spend the internal political capital, the time, the effort needed. And they won't do it until someone forces them to do it. All right. That's it. Thank you. I made it for 32 minutes without having to exit stage left. And I don't know. It's a shorter jaunt than it would have been from the studio upstairs, but it still could have gotten interesting. Fortunately, I didn't have to do it. Sorry again for missing PFT Live. I got a new Adidas thing that I was going to wear today with Michael Hawley, and oh well. We'll have Michael Hawley next week, unless I get sick again, or unless he does, I guess. We'll be back with PFT Live on Monday, bright and early at 7 a.m. Eastern on NBCSN, Peacock, and everywhere else you can see it or hear it. And who knows? It's noon Eastern as I wrap this up. If something else happens today, I'll be right back down here. Enjoy the weekend. Check us out all weekend long at ProFootballTalk.com. And hey, if you haven't yet, if you feel bad for me because I was sick, just buy Big Shield. You want to express sympathy because I was sick? 99 cents for the ebook, $14.99. Get a few copies for your friends, for your family, for your enemies, for anyone that you feel compelled to buy a gift for, $14.99. And if in lieu of sending me an email saying, I hope you're better, just 99 cents for the ebook, $14.99 for this. All right. Every item has been exhausted on the piece of paper that I stole from NBC. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.